Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs War Room Update. We are on day number 269 of the war. That means almost 9 months since the October 7 massacre. The war is raging on all fronts still. In Gaza, the IDF forces are still operating throughout the Gaza Strip, in the north, in the south, in the Rafah corridor, in the Philadelphia corridor, in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Today, just earlier on, we saw a barrage of 20 rockets being fired by the terrorists from the area of Khan Yunis, in that central area, central southern area of the Gaza Strip. In the north, with Hezbollah, the war of attrition has continued on. More attacks by Hezbollah being responded to by the IDF, targeting all of the different options that there are there, operational options, organizational options, the terrorists on the ground. Nothing, I think, is safe in southern Lebanon when you're a Hezbollah terrorist. That war obviously escalating all the time, and discussions constantly as to what will happen next. Will there be an all-out war with Lebanon? How long can Israel tolerate and suffer these continuous escalations in attacks from Hezbollah without a substantial response targeting Lebanon, the country? In the south, the Houthis are continuing on targeting the freedom of navigation through the Gulf of Aden and up into the Red Sea. And in Judea and Samaria, the terrorists are carrying on as if nothing's happened. Their goal is to help the other terrorists in the Gaza Strip. It's the same terrorist organizations. It's the same Hamas. It's the same Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades. It's the same Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. And the same is Palestinian Islamic Jihad. All of these terrorist organizations don't operate only in the Gaza Strip, but they operate also in Judea and Samaria, and sometimes with greater force. But what we're going to discuss today with our guest, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Yossi Kuperwasser, is the subject of Iran, Iran's war of perception, how really we're framing this attack on Israel in all types of different terms, and the chances that the Iranians are trying to seize in order to ensure that this conflict gets worse and worse. Not only funding, pushing, dominating the terrorists in the Gaza Strip and in Lebanon, Iran has its proxies. It has Hamas, it has Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it has the Houthis, it has Hezbollah. What's less known is the efforts of Iran to arm the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. We've seen a few sparks of this over the period of time. It started back in 2001 with the Karin A incident. If you remember, that was the ship sponsored by the Iranians carrying over 50 tons of weapons, purchased by Yasser Arafat and his then right-hand man, Fuad Shubaki, using the funds for the fuel account, which was one of the only accounts which wasn't supervised at the time, 2001, after the war had already started. And Yasser Arafat really playing the game very, very well, using funds that he knew wouldn't be traceable in order to purchase vast amounts of weapons. That continued on over the periods of time. And then we saw in March another massive shipment of Iranian arms being transferred into Judea and Samaria and being seized by the IDF forces. Just today as well, there was a seizure of tens, dozens, scores of weapons, handguns, assault rifles on that border with Jordan, the same place that's been the site of and the scene of numerous attempts by Iran to smuggle weapons into Judea and Samaria. So Yossi, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Iran and this idea of what it's trying to project to the world as to what exactly this war is going on about. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, the main purpose of Iran efforts, exception in the realm and other realms as well, ever since October 7th, is to make sure that in the end of this war, Hamas will remain in power in Gaza. That's, I mean, the long-term goal is, of course, to destabilize Israel to the point that it will collapse. But at this point, the goal is more limited, to make sure that Hamas stays in power in Gaza. For that purpose, Iran has mobilized all its proxies in the region, Hezbollah from day one, and a couple of days later, the Houthis in Yemen, and the Iraqi militias, Iraqi Shiite militias that are loyal to Iran as well. And of course, some of the activities that Iran can do by itself in order to make sure that Hamas stays in power. And one of the tools that is being used for that, or two of the tools that are being used in this context that you mentioned now, are very important. One is the perception war, trying to deter Israel from removing Hamas from power. And second is the effort to arm the Palestinians in the Palestinian Authority areas in order to make sure that they contribute their share in destabilizing Israel and force Israel to spend some of its troops in fighting against the threat from the areas of the Palestinian Authority, so that Israel will be able to invest less troops in removing Hamas from power in Gaza. That is the general idea. Now, this, of course, is translated into practical terms. So, in the perceptional war, there are two major elements that the Iranians are using. One is open threats towards Israel that if you do this, the world is going to come to an end, especially Israel is going to come to an end. And as we heard this week from the Iranian representative in the United Nations, if Israel is going to remove Hamas from power in Gaza, then the Iranians are going to obliterate Israel. Israel is going to disappear altogether. And that's, and of course, these threats repeat themselves all along the way. Israel has to know that if it's going to take action against Hezbollah in Lebanon, again, this was what they actually said this week, then they are going to obliterate it, and so on and so forth. All the time threats: don't enter Gaza with a ground offensive, don't enter Rafah, don't enter this, don't do that. If you do any of these steps, then the sky is falling. That's one area where the perception warfare is being fought. Not very impressively, because Israel continues to fight and make progress towards achieving its goal in the war. Not enough progress, not because of the Iranians, but not enough progress because there are strides within the Israeli society that want to make sure that Israel doesn't go all the way. And of course, the United States also has its opinion about what Israel is going to do. And to a large extent, it rhymes with the Iranian messages. We have to remember in this respect that the Iranian message is not only directly towards Israel. It's not only trying to convince Israel to refrain from doing all kinds of things. One of the main efforts of the Iranians in this respect is to convince the United States to hold Israel back by having this perception war of Israel towards the United States itself. All these threats of widening the war and turning it into a large-scale regional war in which the United States will find itself involved is playing on the weakness of the very visible weakness of the United States that says that it doesn't want to get involved in regional war. If you don't want to get involved in regional war, then we shall threaten you with a regional war. And then you are, of course, going to run to the Israelis and tell them, hey, don't do this, don't do that, so that we shall not need to end up in a regional war. And this is working much better than threatening Israel directly, because the Americans are prone to listen to those threats and to act upon those threats. That's exactly what the Iranians are doing. With the United States, they do it quite successfully. The other element of the perception war is the digital war that the Iranians have been embarking on ever since October 7th. And the purpose of this war is not to end up with Israel doing this or that, but the main purpose of this warfare, the digital warfare, is to sow hatred amongst the Israelis, sow chaos amongst the Israelis, and by that make it more difficult for the Israelis to show and reach the cohesion and the resolve they need in order to win the war. As long as the Israelis fight with each other, it's going to be more difficult for the Israelis to garner their capabilities and fight the war the way they should fight. It is not working very well if you look at the end game. Israel is fighting, and there is enough cohesion in the ranks of the military. But if you look at how good they're doing in sowing hatred and chaos within the Israeli society, they are doing it quite well. They have several digital groups that are working on that in the internet, using all options. They use the Facebook groups, they use the Twitter, and so on and so forth, in order to promote ideas that would cause damage to the cohesion of Israel. For example, they have several groups that pretend to be extreme right. They have a group that it's called Judea Alliance, that pretend to be extreme right, and tries to promote all kinds of ideas against the center and center left in Israel and against the government. And they have a group called Feast that is also doing the same thing. They pretend to be Kahana High organization, and disseminates similar messages. And on the other hand, they have like 4 groups that pretend to be center or even left, the Tears of the Fighters, and so on and so forth. Bring Home Now, and then other groups internet groups that pretend to be coming from the left side and trying to say, what is this all good for? Let's stop the war. The most important thing is to give up Hamas and allow Hamas to stay in power, because the most important thing is to release the hostages, and so on and so forth. Of course, these efforts fall on a very fertile ground, because these debates are being fought in the Israeli public even without the Iranians. We don't need the Iranians for that. So the Iranians magnify the inner debate in Israel and hope that this is going to cause damage to the Israeli cohesion and make it more difficult for Israel to fight the war that it is committed to fight and has to fight against Hamas. The end purpose, as I said, to make sure that Hamas stays in power. And we see that from their point of view, whatever some of the families of the hostages are saying, that we need to stop the war and allow Hamas to have the deal for the hostages release the way they want it. Everything. Let's give Hamas everything. Let's keep Hamas in power. It's something that the Iranians build on for good reason from their point of view. Of course, the hostage family, those hostage families claim for that, call for that, don't do it because of the Iranians. They do it because they're all married. But the Iranians jump on this wagon, and vice versa, of course. The left-leaning, right-leaning are used by the Iranians simultaneously. The Iranians do, as said, they did it before the October 7th too. Some of the groups the Iranians use today have been active even before October 7th. They revived them after October 7th. And the Iranians are pretty good at that. They are doing a lot of activity. They're doing it with relatively good Hebrew. They are pretty good at working on the net in this perception war. The results, as I said, are not that impressive, but not because they are not working well, just because the feuds in Israeli society are there anyhow. So the value added by the Iranians is not that critical. That's the perception. Second, I thought, as we mentioned most correctly, is the effort to make sure that the areas under the Palestinian Authority control are challenging Israel with terror activities, and that this requires Israel to invest some of its military capabilities in the areas under Palestinian control. And we see that in this, I'm not sure it's only them, it's Hamas and many others that are involved in that, but they too take part in this effort, and they are quite successful. We see that ever since October 8th, the activities of terrorists in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority, especially in the refugee camps, has been really rising steadily. And in spite of the ongoing effort of the IDF, really impressive effort, arresting thousands and thousands, more than 5,000 people, terrorists were arrested, and more than 500 were killed. In spite of that, the terror campaign goes on, and we see parades of terrorists in all cities of Palestinian Authority. and we see the influx of weapons uninterrupted. I wouldn't say uninterrupted, but by and large uninterrupted. The success today in foiling an attempt to smuggle 75 handguns is nice, but who knows how many managed to get through. We have here and there some successes, but I'm afraid much is making its way in. And we see every day that those parades of armed Palestinian terrorists in Nur Shams camp in Tulkarem, in the Jenin camp near the city of Jenin, in Balata refugee camp, and elsewhere. They are able to bring these weapons in. They do that together with Hezbollah, who's overseeing some of the activities. They use some of the Hamas activists that are involved in this business, both in Lebanon and in Turkey. There's a big effort to arm the Palestinian terrorists in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority and to make sure that they carry out terror attacks. In fact, the number of terror attacks that were actually carried out that caused damage to Israelis, killed Israelis or maimed them, is much, much less than what the Iranians wanted to see. They wish to see much more lethal activities on behalf of the people that they support. But the military, the IDF, is extremely successful in preventing that from happening. It's not that successful in preventing the weapons from reaching the terror groups in the refugee camps, but it is quite successful in preventing terror attacks from taking place throughout the areas of the Judea and Samaria. And some of the terror attacks, by the way, took place inside Palestinian-controlled territories. We saw just recently 2 people losing their lives in terror attacks in the city of Qalqilia with careless and irresponsible Israelis entering these cities, knowing what's going on in these cities and taking the risk just to buy some vegetables or cheaper price or to fix the teeth of the car. These people are really making big mistakes, and they believe that they can get away with it. And, but there are attempts to carry out attacks along the roads in Judea and Samaria. There are. We pay the price for that, but the numbers are much less than what the Iranians have wished to see and anticipated to see as a result of what they do. I'd say that it's not only these areas that are under the Iranian magnifying glass. What I'm concerned with even more is the situation in Jordan. The Iranians invest a lot in their effort to destabilize Jordan and to build a terror base in Jordan itself. Fortunately, the Jordanian security forces are quite efficient. They managed to foil some of these attempts. Just recently, 2 such attempts were foiled. That's very nice, and I think we as Israel should keep very close cooperation with Jordan to make sure that they are successful. The more successful the Jordanians are in that, it's going to contribute also to make it more difficult for Iran to deliver arms to the Judea and Samaria area and to the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority there. So it's a major effort, and we should continue with that. And we have to remember there are so many Palestinians in Jordan that the situation is quite inviting from the point of view of the Iranians and Hamas.
So Yossi, I want to pick up on a few of the points that you mentioned and maybe try and develop them a little bit, if I may. The threats coming from Iran, are they more of a paper tiger, or are they threats that we should be worried about? What do I mean? On the night of the 13th, 14th of April, we saw Iran make good on one of its promises. They fired 330, 340 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, UAVs towards Israel. Most of them, or many of them, fell within Iranian territory. Many of them were shot down on the way by the international coalition. And at the end of the day, despite the severity of the attack and its nature, the damage actually caused to Israel was almost negligible. So when Iran makes these threats that we're going to obliterate you, I know that it's common practice to give, obviously, credence to these threats, but to what extent do they really have an army that they can send? Do they have an air force that they can use? Or is their capability limited to their rockets?
No. I suggest to take the Iranian threat seriously. They continuously and persistently arm all those proxies around us, and you see how many arms Hamas has in the Gaza Strip. It never ends. Even today, as you mentioned, there were 20 rockets launched from Gaza towards the area enveloping the strip. So it's they are very capable, and they have a very vast military industry that produces some fine arms, and we shouldn't underestimate. It's not only the arms are fine, but there are plenty of them. We should take it very seriously, and that doesn't mean that we should underestimate ourselves. The fact that the Iranian missiles didn't hit us is not because the Iranian threat missiles are not dangerous. They are very dangerous. The reason why they didn't hit us is that we are also good, and so is the United States, and so is the United Kingdom, and so is France. And to some extent, so is Jordan and Saudi Arabia, if they participated in thwarting this Iranian threat. We are invested in these capabilities for tens of years, and be ready to face the Iranian threat. Look at what happened to a country that was not well prepared. Saudi Arabia paid a heavy price on September 19th, 2019. This was the same missiles, the same drones, and the result was much more painful. So I wouldn't underestimate the threat from the Iranians. I would say that we have prepared ourselves and we are well equipped in order to face this threat, but we should take it very seriously. And on top of this direct threat from Iran, they have the capability to send forces towards us. Hezbollah, Hamas, we fight Hamas for 9 months, we fight Hezbollah for 9 months. It's not a walk in the park. And we lost a lot of people. So we shouldn't underestimate them. They have the Houthis, look at what the Houthis did. They sort of blocked the maritime entrance to Israel from the south. It's the Iranians are pretty capable and pretty dangerous. We should take them very seriously. And on top of all of this, they still have in the reserve all kinds of assets that they have not used yet. The Fatimiyun and the Zainabiyun and all kinds of militias that are made of Baluchis and Afghanis that they can use in the future as well. They use them in Syria. This is Iran is a regional superpower. We have to admit that. It's, not only that it is a regional superpower, it's a very dangerous regional superpower because it is determined to become the hegemon power in the Middle East. And it's determined to it's ready to use military tools in order to make this happen. And the fact that they dared to launch 350 projectiles towards Israel on the night of the 13th and 14th of April tells you a fortune about how dangerous they are. These people they have a different mindset than ours. And, they are totally committed, fanatically committed to promoting their status as the hegemon of the Middle East. And this is all a step on the way to become the hegemon power in the world. It's not for tomorrow morning, but it's something they have in mind. So we have to realize that the Iranians are extremely dangerous. That said, or maybe one element I would add to that, how dangerous they are, look at what they're doing on the nuclear realm. They are marching towards having the capability to produce nuclear weapons. They have accumulated already enough highly enriched uranium, 60% or 20%, that would allow them to have military-grade uranium of 90% enrichment within no time at all, for enough for several explosive nuclear devices that can be turned into nuclear weapons within a short period of time. This is where we stand. And they don't show any concern about what the international community is going to do about it. They keep moving. They ignore the threats of the international community to the extent that there are such threats at all. And that is the Iran that we have to face. They have their problems. They have the problems at home. The people of Iran don't like the regime. They want to see change. We are just nearing an election that one of the candidates, Pezeshkian, the conservative guy, sorry, the reformist guy, is showing some more readiness to listen to the concerns of the public in Iran. But looking at it from the point of view of the military threat that Iran poses towards Israel and the rest of the Middle East, it's a very serious one. That said, now comes the that said. That said, we are, as I said, also strong. And what has been proven in mid-April, on the 13th, 14th, and 9th, and on the 19th, when Israel allegedly retaliated very moderately, was that, yes, Iran is dangerous and moving towards having a nuclear weapon and is ready to use force in order to promote its interests. It's very dangerous, but it's less dangerous than what it believes it is. That's the point. They are not as dangerous as they believe they are, because they misevaluate the capabilities of Israel and the United States. And what we have proven is not only that we can deal with the Iranian threat if they launch rockets towards us, but we can reach targets in Iran and hit them in spite of all the efforts of the Iranians to foil such an effort. And which proves that there is a credible military option vis-a-vis the Iranian nuclear project. And that's something that's very important and should be used in order to deter Iran from moving forward with its nuclear project and other projects that they are trying to do.
To what extent, Yossi, would you attribute the threats to deterring Israel from destroying Hamas, attacking Lebanon much more substantively, and possibly not destroying Hezbollah, but substantively weakening Hezbollah? Or B, to what extent are those threats really there also for the local community, for the Middle East, for the Saudi Arabians, for the Jordanians, to hear from Iran that we are a power that can stand up to and even beat Israel? If we allow, as you said, if Iran's goal is to allow Hamas to retain power after the war is finished, to allow Hezbollah to survive into the day after, they seem to have set themselves up almost for a win, because Israel isn't going to be able to necessarily entirely quash Hamas, won't be entirely able to destroy all of Hezbollah. So they've already prepared themselves to say, look, we've won. And then that message going directly to, as you said, they've already been trying to undermine Jordan. They've already been looking towards Saudi Arabia to taking back Mecca for the last 50 years as well. That's part of their ideology. How would you divide up that focus? What is Israel focused? What is regional focused to the other Arab leaders who they also pose a threat to?
Well, I don't think it's A or B. It's A because A serves B. If you manage to keep Hamas in power in spite of all the efforts of Israel to remove it, if in the end of the war, Yahya Sinwar is going to step out from his tunnel and raise his hands and signal V with his two fingers, then this is something that's going to be immediately translated into a victory for Iran in the region too, and it's going to be translated into a bigger effort by Iran to take over Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Mecca and all the nice prizes that are waiting for them. This is something the Americans don't understand. The Americans are so eager to avoid the regional war, they don't understand that means that they prefer to lose the war. Because
fundamental, I think, Yossi, excuse me interrupting, I think that's really a fundamental of the understanding. If Hamas isn't entirely destroyed, the result is not just Hamas and Yahya Sinwar surviving to fight another day to murder more Jews, but completely empowering and emboldening Iran, and also simultaneously weakening the other countries in the region.
Of course, this is that's why, even though this is a war about the fate of Hamas, the real issue at stake is not the fate of Hamas. The real issue at stake is the fate of the Middle East and the fate of the world. If the United States is going to be so weak to lose Jordan and Saudi Arabia, then this is going to have very harsh repercussions on the big powers competition, and it's going to contribute to China and to Russia and Iran in their fight against the West domination and dominance in the international community.
And that's really a success of
based order.
the moral perception, Yossi. It's persuading the world that the danger comes from Israel quashing Hamas, rather than understanding that the danger comes from Israel not crushing Hamas.
Sure, that's exactly the issue. And I sincerely hope that Netanyahu is going to use, he has to do it very carefully because not to alienate anybody in the United States. But I hope he is going to be able to clarify this message when he's in the Congress, in 24th of July. It's extremely important that the international community understands it. I mean, he's going to have the attention of the world leadership for I don't know how long this speech is going to take, but he should clarify this is what we're fighting for. We are fighting for ourselves. We have Hamas. They tried to kill us, and they killed many of us. And we have to make sure that they are not going to be able to do that again. And we have to release the hostages. And we have a full set of goals that have to do with our own interests. And one of these interests is to kick Iran out of here, because Iran is a bad player with bad intentions, and we have to deal with Iran in the immediate context of the Israeli security. But Israeli security is not a standalone issue. Israeli security is something directly and deeply woven into the international security situation. And if we let Hamas stay in power, and if we let Iran celebrate the victory of having Hamas in power after what they did in October 7th, this is going to have a terrible impact on everything in the Middle East. Just like leaving Afghanistan the way they left the Americans was one of the arguments that led Putin believe that the time is right for moving forward. These things don't stay in one place and remain there. They move from one place to another, and we have to understand that. I know it's not pleasant for anybody to hear something like that. It might even sound insulting and problematic, but we have to face reality.
To what extent, Yossi, do you think that King Abdullah and MBS actually understand the importance of Israel's victory over Hamas? Is their posturing at the moment, or their words at the moment, simply an idea of posturing to feign support for the Palestinians, but really they themselves fear an emboldened Iran? Or do they not care anymore? Are they looking towards an alliance with Iran and to maybe abandon that alliance with the US that doesn't seem to be a reliable partner?
Well, I tell you, I think that all the pragmatic Arabs are praying for Israel to win the war, and even more so pray that the United States will help Israel to win the war. Because for them, it's not about Israel, it's about the United States. They understand Israel is a regional power, it's an important regional power, but the United States is the backbone of their security. So they want to see the United States committed to its ally and helping its ally to win the war, instead of putting all kinds of limits on how they fight and telling their allies not to do this and not to do that. It's and keeping away all kinds of weapons. So it's yes, they care about the Palestinians. Not that they don't care about the Palestinians. They do care about the Palestinians. They want to see a solution for the Palestinian problem, but they definitely don't want to see this solution coming from the hands of Hamas, which is a very bitter enemy of all those regimes. So it's they don't want Hamas to win. They don't want Hamas to stay in power. There are limits of what they can say and what they can't say, because each one of them has their own domestic considerations they have to take into account. And everybody knows that. Nobody expects them to speak loudly the way they pray silently before they go to bed. But everybody understands what they're praying for. And the point is that as long as they see the United States not supporting Israel decisively, not helping Israel to remove Hamas from power in Gaza, allowing Hamas to stay in power, even though, there's this contradiction repeated itself when President Biden spoke on the debate on Wednesday. It was the same thing like on the 31st of May in his speech. On the one hand, he says, we want Hamas to be removed from power. On the other hand, he promotes a deal that leaves Hamas in power. So what are you trying to accomplish? So the people in the Arab world looking at that say to themselves, okay, maybe it's not such a good idea to put all my eggs in the American basket. Let's put some eggs in the Iranian basket. So we see the Bahrainis are becoming friendlier with the Iranians. The Emiratis are becoming friendlier with the Iranians. The Saudis are becoming friendlier with the Iranians. Everybody looks at the situation and says to themselves, well, I don't know to what extent I can count on the United States. And they don't hear something really different enough from President Trump, candidate Trump. And so then they say to themselves, I'll make sure that I have some sort of a balance in my investments. I don't want to be threatened by Iran. And this is something that is not because they like Iran, they fear Iran, they don't like Iran, they want to see Iran, the Iranian regime, the Iranian radical regime change. But security considerations, security interests are the most dominant element in their policy.
They want to be able to survive in the meantime before even before facing the Iranian threat in itself. I think, Yossi, if I can just take you back to another subject that you mentioned that at least for me was quite a headline. This really involvement of the Iranians in the social media, trying to really undermine subversion within Israel, trying to put the different camps against each other, paint the right wing as evil aggressors, and really using the subject of the hostages as a means to undermine the fabric of Israeli society. Explain to me a little bit more about that goal. What are they trying to do? They're trying to destroy us from within?
Exactly. They're trying to destroy us from within. And they take advantage of the fact that we are destroying ourselves from within anyhow. So it falls on, as I said, on a well-prepared ground. And that's what's happening. They don't care if the left wins or the right wins, as long as they fight each other. And that's to inflame the fighting. That's exactly what they're trying to accomplish. By the way, this is not a special Iranian technique. It's exactly what the Russians were doing in the United States and in the West in general. And the Iranians are doing the same in the United States and in the other places in the West too. This is the purpose of social media. And social media is all built on the idea that if you are extremist, if you are using vile language, and then people listen to you, and there are likes, and people respond to you and share what you posted. And that's how social media is playing a very dangerous role in promoting hatred within and all kinds of internal problems. That's exactly what the Iranians and many others are doing vis-a-vis Israel as well. And yes, it's not something new. By the way, as I said, they did it before. They used they used very intensively the judicial reform debate in Israel for that purpose as well. It's not something new for the Iranians. This is what they're trained to do. They have groups that, as I said, are trained with that, and they use good Hebrew. They use AI, artificial intelligence, in this context quite a lot in posting all kinds of posters that show Netanyahu or his opponents, doesn't matter for them, as caricatures and so on and so forth. That's what this arm of the Iranians are doing. The idea was, for a long time, from the Iranian point of view, that this is the only way in which Iran can directly get involved in the battle without bearing the consequences of being involved in. You can do that, you can fight in the social media, but since you have the deniability and you have the fact that you don't kill anybody directly, you don't use force, then the chances that somebody will retaliate against you, especially as you are a country that doesn't have social media and open social media, then the chances that you are going to suffer retaliation is relatively low. And the Iranians did that. They try all kinds of other stuff, like attacks, internet attacks, and all kinds of targets in Israel, hospitals, and others, also in the same purpose of sowing distrust between the government and governmental officers and the public, weaken the Israeli cohesiveness. That's also something that they are doing. And that was all true until 13th of October, of April, when they got directly involved in fighting against Israel in a violent manner. But they keep doing the non-violent option, using the non-violent option.
It seems that their digital attack on Israel is no less, I would say, even possibly more effective than their kinetic attack on Israel, and using their capabilities to hide behind social media, hide behind AI, and use the advantages of AI to translate their messages into end language and to put it into places where it's very, very difficult to then trace the source. It seems that is a positively chosen course of action, which is bringing them quite a lot of a return.
Not less than they expected. I would say less than they expected, less than they wanted. But yes, some. Of course, if you compare it to the impact of their missile attack, that was very limited. So it's not a very high bar. But their digital warfare is not as successful as they want it to be. The main reason is that the value added by their activities is not that significant, because what happens in Israel is so bad anyhow. So the value added is limited.
They just can't quantify the level of their success because we're so divided in and of ourselves.
Exactly. So, but they pour oil into this bonfire all the time. To some extent, it works. They even manage in some cases to make people do all kinds of steps in the real world. They manage to move from the social media to the real world. In some cases, people that they were calling for people to put all kinds of AI posters they produced on all kinds of places, and people actually took them and put the posters in the places that they were trying to make it happen. They can, from an operational point of view, they can say to themselves, what a great operation. How effective it was in making the situation in Israel worse, to some extent, but not a huge extent. There are enough useful idiots in Israel to cooperate with this nonsense, but less than what the Iranians would like to be.
So just as we wrap up, really, Yossi, we discussed the infiltration also of Iran into Judea and Samaria, and the smuggling of weapons. Where is the Palestinian Authority in all of that? Are they acting together with the Iranians? The March shipment of arms seemed to be destined for the Palestinian Authority, and now we've just seen reports in the last few days that the Palestinian Authority really glorifying itself. The 12% of all of the prisoners in the Israeli prisons are members of the Palestinian security forces. Who can we rely on there? Is there anyone who can rely on to push back on this attempt of Iranian infiltration, or is the PA to a great extent in bed with the Iranians already?
I think we can't rely on anybody but ourselves. We can't rely on anybody else. The Palestinian Authority is not an enemy of Iran. The Palestinian Authority is a foe of Hamas, and this way it finds itself opposing Iran. but not to the extent that they will take steps against Iran. That's not to be expected. And if arms are coming in from Jordan to Palestinian terrorists in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority is not going to do anything about it. If at all, it's going to encourage it. I haven't ever heard about a Palestinian Authority thwarting a smuggling attempt into the Palestinian Authority territory. Let's not be naive. This is not going to happen. Palestinian Authority is, of course, paying for some of it, because they pay salaries to the families of terrorists and to terrorists themselves. Some of this money may eventually end up in financing some of these efforts to smuggle arms. Don't count on the Palestinian Authority. We have a lot to do on ourselves, by ourselves, being more aware of the Iranian perception efforts is very important. Knowing that some of these groups that I mentioned earlier are actually run by Iran is important. Preventing them from operating on our social media is important. There are things that we can do, and educating the people in Israel so that they will not fall prey for these Iranian perception efforts is important. There are a lot of things that we can do. Legislation may be also necessary in this respect, or regulation at least is necessary in this respect to be able to thwart the Iranian efforts. Because even though, as I said, the Iranian efforts today are important, but not that successful in the sense that they are changing the situation in Israel, the Iranians, like all of our enemies, have a relatively high learning curve. And they keep learning from everything they're doing, and they will become better and better as time goes by. So we have to be ready to face a better threat, a more dangerous threat from the Iranians, and make sure that we know how to fight against.
So if the understanding, Yossi, between us is that that the defeat of Hamas is key and pivotal to both thwarting the plans of Iran, possibly deterring Iran. Just to leave on a positive note, I hope, with a question which I hope I can get the right answer. Can Israel beat Hamas?
Not only Israel can beat Hamas, Israel has to beat Hamas. It can and it has to. I hear all these debates in Israel whether we should hit Hamas and win Hamas over. This is ridiculous. We were attacked by Hamas from Gaza. We should win the war against Hamas in Gaza. We should remove Hamas from power. That's the stated goal of this war. It's to defeat Hamas militarily and to remove it from power in Gaza and to release the hostages. These are the three things we have to accomplish, and we can accomplish all three. We should not let our attention be distracted to other areas at this point, because if we win the war against Hamas, this will be a victory on all other fronts simultaneously. And Hamas is, even though it's so well armed and so well entrenched in Gaza, is still the weakest opponent we have in the region, and we should start with it. Then we shall be able to deal with the others from a point of strength, position of strength.
That's something which I hope Yossi is actually going to happen, in this understanding that Hamas is really the key to moving forward, not only supporting and enhancing Israel's immediate security against these genocidal terrorists, but also the idea of promoting regional security, which is really the wider goal, not only ensuring that Iran loses on that southern Gaza front, but also thereafter also with Hezbollah. I fear that what you said earlier, that the threats from Iran are very real and should be taken with the utmost certainty that they will actually realize themselves. And so moving on to that war with Hezbollah could possibly and potentially cause a wider escalation. Yossi, unfortunately,
I think just to wrap it up, we have to understand the war with Hamas is actually a war with Iran. That's what we have to keep in mind.
That's, I think, the message that needs to go out to everyone. In the meantime, thank you, Yossi, for your time. Thank you for really your tremendous insights, allowing us to understand what actually is going on in this war of kinetic war, but perception, digital war, everything put together. I think it's one of the more complicated issues to understand here, that there are multiple levels to this war that's going on, multiple fronts, some and some red herrings, and those have to be better understood, but definitely by the people who are making the decisions in those closed rooms. So Yossi, thank you again for joining us. For our audience, we will be back with you again next week on Monday. Sorry, it's only Monday today. We'll be back with you again on Wednesday. I'm losing track of days of the week. I apologize. We will be back with you again on Wednesday. And we'll be really just continuing on with this discussion of what's going on, not only in Israel, not only with our wars here, but also in the entire region, to give that better understanding of where the next steps should be on the way. So thank you for joining us. And in the meantime,